Welcome, everybody, to New York's #2 sports podcast. Week 9 in the NFL. Had a bunch of crazy games. We're going to get right into it. So, the Giants beat Washington. I was not rooting for the Giants to win, so naturally they won. My record in rooting for them this year, or not rooting for them, there's been 6 games that I've rooted for the Giants to win in. They have not won any of those games. So they're 0-6 when I've rooted for the Giants to win. When I've rooted for the Giants to lose in 3 games, both Washington games and the Tampa game, they only won the Tampa game. They lost, they lost the Tampa game and they won both Washington games, which is very typical. They always beat Washington. Just like they always lose to the Eagles and always lose to the Cowboys, they always beat Washington. And the one thing here is that the division, miraculously at 2-7, is still up for grabs. So, as I had said previously, if the Giants beat Washington, I'm back on board. And it's, rooting for them to beat the Eagles. And it's not like a lack of faith, or it's just being realistic about the situation and kind of just weighing the odds in terms of wanting Dave Gettleman to be fired and the draft situation and everything like that. And, in my estimation, with now having won 2 games, not to say that we still couldn't get a good draft, not to say that all the things that I want aren't still in play. I'm going to be pulling for us against Philly, and I just know how it's going to go down. I saw it a few weeks ago. I've seen it for years. It's not going to end well. It's going to be a situation where, the Giants are going to find a way to lose to Philly. And one could argue that the Giants, not in the win-loss department, but one could argue the Giants may be the best team in this sad division. I have to give them credit. They played well against Washington. I think they were aided a little bit by the fact that Kyle Allen got hurt, although Alex Smith had his moments of really kind of surprising me, but I kind of figured, and it ended up happening. He made a couple crucial mistakes down the stretch. If Kyle Allen's in there, not that he's anything great, maybe Washington wins that game. If the Giants had won easily and handily, which they were on their way to maybe doing, I think I would have been more accepting, and I was. When they were 23, it's like, okay, whatever. Win the game, on to Philly next week, and they couldn't even do that. They really almost lost that game to the point where Washington was down by 3 with a chance to either tie the game the first time around when he threw the pick to Jabril Peppers, and the second time around, tying the game. But that's just how it goes in Giants-Washington. Daniel Jones with no turnovers, that's a plus. The Giants' running game was very effective with Wayne Gallman and Alfred Morris, throwback. Golden Tate was, in effect, suspended for kind of his actions the game before against Tampa and some of the social media stuff with his wife. So, sounds like he'll be back against the Eagles. Offensive line did a pretty good job. Andrew Thomas struggled, and that's a problem. But Shane Lemieux has stepped in for Will Hernandez and seemingly done a good job. So some of the other young guys, Matt Peart, a reserve tackle, he was in on a few drives instead of Cam Fleming and Andrew Thomas. He did a good job. The defense for good chunks of the game, and we've seen this, has really done a fantastic job. But then once they need to protect the lead or it gets to a close situation, they really struggle. So again, I still question majorly the clutchness of this team as a whole. Hey, prove me wrong. Beat Philly. I think that would really be big. Not so much in the standings, and of course, they would be, but it's more so just the morale and the overall feeling like, all right, we can actually maybe beat someone besides Washington. You have to learn from your mistakes at some point. So with that loss to Philly a few weeks ago, let's see if you've learned from those mistakes. And Philly's coming off a bye, way more healthy than they've been. This will not be easy, but it's doable. I admit it is doable. The Giants can definitely win this game, but I feel very strongly that Philly will win and probably be a very heartbreaking loss to the Giants. And as a Giant fan, you're going to look back and say, well, it's even worse that we won those Washington games. I know how this works. I've seen it. I wish I was wrong. I wish I was wrong, but it's a little frustrating, and I could see other Giant fans kind of questioning where my allegiance is, or my Giant fandom. But I really am trying to root for what I feel is the best for the team. And I know Dave Gettleman had a good he did have a good offseason. James Bradbury, Blake Martinez, even Leonard Williams, have to give him credit. Leonard Williams has 5 sacks, and he really has been good. I think he's paid too much, but hey, I can't just bash Gettleman the whole time. I think his drafting has been subpar, but yeah, we'll see. Fuck it. So, moving on, let's talk about the Jets. I haven't really given them much attention, and really deservedly so. So, this was a game, for a few reasons, I wanted the Jets to win. As a Giant fan, a few factors within that. Obviously the Giants winning yesterday definitely hurt our chances. But who's to say, who knows what happens, right? If the Jets somehow had won tonight, all of a sudden, hey, look, maybe they win other games. You just never know. As unlikely as it may have been. But that would have been such a gut punch to Jet fans if they had somehow won this game with Joe Flacco at quarterback, a 35-year-old who's basically at the end of his career, not even with Darnold. I mean, that would have been a worst-case scenario for the Jets. But they, unlike the Giants, know how to lose. It brings me back to last year with the Chase Young Bowl, where the Giants won in overtime, and I think that them taking Chase Young, Washington, and the Giants taking Andrew Thomas will be a major factor for years to come. So it's sad that we're even in these conversations. I think, being a Giant fan, and I've become so accustomed the last few years to rooting against my team. It sucks. It really sucks. I wish it wasn't like that. I mean, I was spoiled in a sense. Obviously, the 2 Super Bowls, unbelievable, right? I mean, it could be so much worse as a Giant fan. But yeah, I was spoiled in a sense for a long time there. For most of the Manning era and a little bit before that too. Mostly winning seasons. Or if not, they would get off to a good start and they would always kind of be in the mix. Now, for the most part, through 8 games, the best the Giants are going is 2-6. So there's always that question. They haven't just been bad record-wise. They've been really bad. So going back to the Jets, it felt like, from a Giant perspective, not the Giant-Washington games, like the Giants against the Cowboys or the Eagles, where, in theory, the Jets should have won, but everything that had to go wrong did go wrong. So both offenses were doing what they had to do, and some. And I don't think that the Patriots were going to stop the Jets on downs. They eventually would. We'll get to that. But long story short, Joe Flacco throws an interception with the Jets up by 7. And that was all that was needed to give the Patriots the chance to win the game. All the Jets needed in that situation was a field goal to go up 30-20. And first play, boom. Flacco throws a bomb, and he looked great. The Jets' offensive line was surprisingly very good, even without Mekhi Becton. I mean, Flacco had all day to throw, all night long. I guess it wouldn't have been day, but you get my point. And the Jets' wide receivers were looking good. They were healthy. So there was a lot to like. As a Jet fan, obviously, Jet fans did not want to win the game. But they were doing some good things. And I look back, that interception, and then there was a 3rd and 10 when the Patriots got the ball back, where there was a defensive penalty that extended the drive, and the really big play was a 3rd and 20 where the Patriots get a 19-yard reception. Jacoby Myers went absolutely ballistic tonight. He was really their only option, and he just went. I wouldn't expect to see him, really do that in the future, but against the Jets, anything's possible. So he went absolutely crazy, and eventually they would tie it up. And this didn't surprise me. And so the Jets have the ball tied with under 2 minutes to go. And I'm thinking to myself, the Patriots are going to win this game regulation. That is exactly what I said. And I don't think it took a genius to make that statement, but if there were Vegas odds, for example, there's 3 options. The Jets either win it in regulation, in terms of end of regulation. Jets win it in regulation, it goes to overtime, or the Patriots win it in regulation. And the Patriots winning in regulation at that time would have been your least likely option. And I knew And it was just like the Giant Cowboy game a few weeks back, where the Giants had the ball tied with under 2 minutes to go, and all they needed was a field to win it. And at worst, maybe it doesn't happen, and you go to overtime, and the Jets go 3 and out, and the Patriots eventually, with 8 seconds left, they had a timeout. 8 seconds left. They needed to make a big play on that particular play to get in the field goal range, and that's exactly what they did. And Nick Folk would eventually kick the game-winning field goal, 50-yard field goal. Good. So it was not all that surprising, but yet still frustrating. And the Jets find ways to lose, just like the Giants, except when they play Washington, typically find ways to lose. We see this across the league. The Chargers, they are just teams. That has been, I think, my theme throughout this season, is bad teams find ways to lose almost all the time. It's not logical in terms of the ways it happens, but it does happen. Patriots versus the Jets, as bad as the Patriots looked and as bad as they are, they were going to find a way to win, and not even in overtime, in regulation. So if you're a Jet fan, you got to be very relieved, very happy, but it just goes to show you, it is tough to go 0-16. It's just a fact. At the same time, if you're a Jet fan, I think you're also thinking, like, this may have been our most likely chance to win. And that might also be true. They do play the Patriots again. There are some other games in the schedule that, maybe they could win. But, certainly, you got to be relieved if you're a Jet fan. I wish the Giants could kind of learn a thing or two for them in terms of losing. But it's just, we're talking crazy here. I like, just in terms of, these players, they're not trying to lose. Right? I mean, and why would they? This is their job. This is their livelihood. They're trying to play for another contract. They want to show up well on tape for other teams if they're not going to stay on, the teams that they're currently on. So that's just the way it is. So that's why it's always even tougher when you're rooting against your own team, because those players, they're not thinking that way. That's just never going to happen. You only see that really maybe in the NBA, where you could, with you sit guys out, the load, quote unquote load management or whatever. It's kind of easy to do that, but they have a lottery system there too. Whereas it's just completely different all around. So status quo, I guess we could say. Jets kind of it was a sweat job, but they found a way to do what they do, and that's lose. There were a bunch of other really interesting games. Let's first talk about Saints-Bucks. That wasn't interesting at all, actually. That was probably the most domination I think I've seen in any game this season. Pretty surprising. Although I guess I shouldn't have been that shocked, because maybe this explains now why the Bucks-Giants game was as close as it was. Maybe that was a sign that this was going to be a game that, may not work out so well for Tampa. So now they get all these, Antonio Brown and Godwin comes back and, a bunch of names, and it did not work out well. The Saints took it to them. And that was really big in that division, because the Saints now beat them twice. So in a tie situation, the Saints will win the division. So now it's hard for me not to think that New Orleans, just mathematically and just seeing it, that they got the leg up all of a sudden. That was a huge swing game. Huge swing game, and it wasn't even close. And that was the game that I was most looking forward to, from a non-Giant perspective, just as an NFL fan. I thought, that was maybe the best potential game in the schedule. It was completely wrong. New Orleans deserves all the credit in the world. Drew Brees played really well. Tom Brady looked like he was 43, looked his age. He needs time to throw. If he doesn't, he's in big trouble. And so now, maybe the NFC playoffs could potentially go through the Superdome in New Orleans. I could see that. I could really see that, because Seattle's defense is so bad. It's so fucking bad. I've been saying this, but there's no way. Look, could they win the NFC West? Sure. But I don't see how they're going to be able to, get too deep with that. Just Jamal Adams, it doesn't even matter whether he plays or doesn't play. I mean, that defense is complete garbage. So I think that Green Bay has shown to be, a good team. And Green Bay did beat New Orleans. So maybe don't count out Green Bay as a potential 1 seed. And that's never easy either, especially in the cold, in Lambeau Field. So that could be a big swing in terms of whether Green Bay gets the 1 seed in New Orleans. I'll be keeping an eye on that. Those would be my two, I guess, favorites for that top seed. And I think that there could be some meaning there. I know that, will there be fans? Will there not be fans? Who knows, right? I mean, even if there are, you wouldn't figure it to be too much. So, yeah, I think that Green Bay really, it was an impressive game against San Francisco, who, let's be fair, half their roster either had COVID or has been injured. So, but hey, I mean, you got to play the game, and Green Bay, really took it to them. So I think things can change weekly, right? Like, I still think that Tampa Bay, as badly as they played, it's a really good defense. And we know what that offense can do. So we haven't seen the last of them. But yeah, the NFC West, it's taken a little bit of a step back. Because Seattle, again, that defense is vulnerable. San Francisco is completely banged up, and I have a tough time seeing them really turning it around. The Rams, I think, for being 5-3, not a great 5-3 team. And then you got then you have Arizona, who loses to Miami. That was a fun game. Tua versus Kyler Murray. Kyler's great. This kid is really going to be something special. His running ability, he's shown to be a good passer as well. There's not a whole lot he can't do. So, certainly don't count them out by any stretch, but still, Miami going into Arizona, it speaks to how good Miami is. I'm hoping that Joe Judge can be the next Brian Flores, kind of the in the Belichick tree, just a guy that you can tell they love playing for. And I can kind of see that with Joe Judge. I'm a fan of his. I am. I think if there's one thing that I've seen from the Giants, that Joe Judge definitely, this is the coach of the future. Ben McAdoo was not that. Pat Shermer was not that. I think Joe Judge is. So that's one thing to be happy about. But with Miami, Tua looked good this week. He had to make some plays. He made them. And maybe that was why. Maybe there's a reason why Ryan Fitzpatrick got benched. They must have seen something with Tua. And look, he was, obviously drafted where he was. So, ahead of Justin Herbert, who's been fantastic. So, Miami and Buffalo, that could be an interesting race. And the reason why I can't include New England in there right now, again, they did not look good tonight. Would I be surprised if somehow they find their way back in their mix? No, but I think that's a division between Buffalo and Miami. And don't count Miami out. Do not count them out. They play again in Week 17 in Buffalo, which is interesting, right? You got to figure, maybe some snow, certainly going to be really cold. And, can Miami kind of go up there and win? It'd be fun. It'd be fun. If that was, for the division, that'd be a very interesting game. So Miami, I think, has been definitely one of the pleasant surprises of this season. And they're showing like the correct blueprint to kind of rebuilding. I think it's gone a little bit faster than they thought, and maybe they'll take a step back at some point. But I think if you're the Giants or the Jets, teams like that, I think you're really there's reason for optimism when you see things like that. The Jets are a lot further along. I'm looking more at the Giants here, and a lot of that will be how good Daniel Jones is. That'll be really critical down, at the end of the season to see how he does, and then reassess from there. But yeah, the 4:00 slate in general had it was 3 games. Like I just said, Arizona, Miami, where like Zane Gonzalez somehow went short. He kicked short on a 49-yard field goal. How that happens, I have no idea. Look, it was right on line and it was just short. So really fun game. It's too bad that we'll only see Kyler versus Tua every 4 years. That's, the one bad thing about the scheduling is that you may not get the matchups too frequently. And then Chargers, Raiders, the Chargers find new ways to lose games. And I think Anthony Lynn, his job security cannot be too great. It just can't be, because he has a great quarterback in Justin Herbert. There are pieces on that defense that are injured. and he seems like a guy. I watched like Hard Knocks, for example. The guy, he seems like a good guy. Definitely an easy guy to root for, Anthony Lynn. But I just think that it'd be logical if they went in a different direction. It would make sense. It just would. We've seen it for years too, even before Anthony Lynn. It's not just him. The Chargers have been a team, in all the Phillip Rivers years, where just wild games, and usually they'd come out on the losing end. The talent is way better than the records usually indicate for them. So the end of that game there, they basically drew up a couple of low percentage plays, one-on-one balls, one to Mike Williams, and then one to Parham. And the Williams one, he almost came down with it, but you're asking a lot. I don't think those are the right calls. I'm not saying like draw one to Keenan Allen. Like, it's just not that easy, right? I mean, they're going to be guarding against that. It's not that simple, but I don't know. Back-to-back one-on-ones, it's got to be a perfect throw. And the throws were decent. And originally, really the gut punch for Charger fans was that originally they called it a touchdown for Parham. And, I watched it live and I could tell it hit the ground. But it's funny, these guys do such a good, if you watch, they do such a good sell job, but it's pointless because you have instant replay. So, I guess that's just natural instinct to, make it seem like you caught it, but, they'll find it. And they did. And so I think the Raiders at first weren't even sure. Then all of a sudden they saw the replay and they started going nuts. So big win for Vegas. I feel like I've been kind of underestimating them a bit. Vegas has really impressed. And we'll see if they can keep it going. They've had some good wins. And I would qualify this one. It's a decent win against the Chargers. And they won at Kansas City. They have played really good football. So I feel like I haven't really given them their credit, and maybe it's deserved. Maybe we'll see. And then the other four came Pittsburgh versus Dallas. And Pittsburgh are 8-0, but they're going to lose soon. But Dallas, Garrett Gilbert is a lot better than Ben DiNucci. That's for sure. So, Dallas will certainly be more competitive, you could tell. And even against Philly, it was an ugly game, but the defense played okay. So I think Dallas, they're not going to be like a total punching bag. But Pittsburgh, give Roethlisberger props because he was hurt, clearly, and we're used to this with him, but he gutted it out and really played well. And they had no running game going at all. Connor was phased out. They were just throwing at will. And Ben did an amazing job. It's amazing. It's incredible what he's still doing. With all the injuries at this age, he, while I'm not a fan of some of the things that happened off the field, on the field, the guy really is a winner. Really is. It's hard to take some of that stuff off the field, like out of the equation, but if you do, and it's not really fair to do, it's hard not to root for the guy in certain situations. He really, Pittsburgh's gotten everything they could have ever asked for out of him. Like, and as much as like Eli Manning was good as a Giant, like I give Ben the nod when it's all said and done. And you'll take it from both, right? I mean, 2 Super Bowls apiece for Ben, 3 Super Bowl appearances. But Ben he's great. I mean, the longevity, the fact that he's still, and look, he's not what he was. Don't get me wrong, but just coming off that injury last year, we weren't sure what was going to happen, and here they are 8-0. But I do think on the horizon, that Thanksgiving game against the Ravens is going to be really, really fun. And I think that the Ravens might win that one. I do. I know it's in Pittsburgh, and I know Pittsburgh just won in Baltimore, but Baltimore, don't count them out yet. That's a really good defense, and they just beat the Colts 24-10, and Lamar hasn't been great. There's been a little bit of regression. Like I said, if they're losing games by a lot, I don't think he can get them back in it. But if it's close, it's a good defense. Obviously, Lamar, he can run the ball. Overall, it's a very solid system where, they just chew up clock. They don't really have much of a passing game, but they make it work. And the Colts, that offense is abysmal. Phillip Rivers, I know he doesn't have a whole lot there. Like T.Y. Hilton's hurt, and even when he was healthy, he wasn't doing much. So it's and the running back situations, I don't know. It's not great. It's like it's a running back by committee there, and the wide receivers are weak. So the Colts defense is good. I think that Colts defense is good. But This Thursday night game, Colts versus the Titans, it's going to go a long way to that division winner because the Titans played well against the Bears, who, for what their record are, they're not as good as their record indicates. This is not, their offense is poor. Defense is okay. But still, the Titans, the score was misleading. The Titans really won that game with ease. So, Indy at Tennessee, this is the first meeting that they've had this season. Clearly, this is for the division, right? I mean, Houston and Jacksonville will not be a part of it. Houston did beat Jacksonville this weekend. It was a close game. But I think that right now, and it's so week to week, right? Like, you can't overreact. But that Phillip Rivers, that's a problem. And I'm not like a huge Jacoby Brissett guy, but you do have to wonder at some point if that switch is made. Because Brissett is serviceable. I think they'll ride it out with Rivers for a bit, but I'm not liking what I'm seeing from him. I think the end is near for Phillip Rivers. And I like what I've seen more from the Titans, but I do think that it's going to be, I'm kind of like, unsure as I say it, but I think it's in Tennessee, if that matters. I give Tennessee the edge. I think overall, offense and defense combined, even though I think the Tennessee defense against a good offense could struggle, Indy is not that. They should, just like they succeeded against the Bears, I would expect the same against Indy. So I think Tennessee, with that good offense, the solid running game, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown in the receiving game, Tannehill kind of playing mistake-free football, I think Tennessee should win that one. Is it the sexiest Thursday night game? No. But it's a meaningful one. Very much so. In terms of, other kind of news and notes, Christian McCaffrey, what can you say about him? He didn't miss a beat. And the sad thing is now he hurt his shoulder, so now he might be out again. Who knows? But the guy is legit. And Carolina took Kansas City to the brink. And Carolina really could have won that game. We've seen this Kansas City defense, even like over the course of just like them winning the Super Bowl, like it kind of comes and goes. But that defense, you can't count on it all the time. But it's risen to the occasion. But I think that Carolina, Matt Rule has brought a little bit of semblance to that team where it looked like things were kind of, going off the rails with Ron Rivera. They've quickly kind of reset. And is Teddy Bridgewater the QB of the future? No, but as a stopgap, he's solid. Definitely. So Carolina's definitely going to be a team down the stretch. Will they make the playoffs? No, but you're not going to want to play them because I think, as we saw at Kansas City, they were, they could have so won that game. I disagree with the fact that they went for an onside kick down by 2 with 3 timeouts left. I understand it's going to be tough to get Mahomes off the field, but you were able to do it. But you hurt yourself in terms of now you had no timeouts, you had bad field position. I would have just played it straight up. It's so tough to get an onside kick. Unless you're going against the Falcons, it's just not going to happen. Speaking of the Falcons, staying in the NFC South, they get a win against Denver. Nothing jumps out with that game, right? I mean, 2 teams that are below 500, but you could see Atlanta's getting going. Similar to the Vikings. So there's a few teams that were had bad records that you knew were going to improve, and I view the Vikings as one of them. The Falcons, and the Texans, they're not great. They have holes. We've seen better days for those teams, but they're not they're not even close to like the Jaguars yet. Those bad teams, the NFC East, they're better than that. So the Vikings might actually, in fact, be the second best team in that division. Like, when all's said and done, I would not be surprised if they are a distant second to Green Bay. Green Bay, they basically, it's going to be a cakewalk for them. And that's why I could see if they, just clean up in that division, that's why that 1 seed could go to them. And so, yeah, we might see Rodgers versus Breeze, which we did not see. We were supposed to see it last year, but the Vikings knocked off the Saints. If the Saints had won, that 2-3 matchup would have been in Lambeau, Rodgers, Breeze. Well, maybe we'll see it this year. And that would be fun. So, yeah, as a Giants fan, just, in recapping, there is progress. Daniel Jones, I can't complain a whole lot with his play this week. didn't really need to do much because they jumped out to a big lead. Let's see this week. And I just want to be happy after these games, right? I mean, even the one game where it went my way with Tampa Giants, I still walked away. It's like, happy to a point. This would bring me definite joy. If they can beat the Eagles to get to 3-7, and then the Eagles would be 3-5-1. This all sounds crazy, but it is 2020, so let's just roll with it. The Giants would be a game out. 2 on the loss side, but a game out with 6 games to go. So crazier things have happened. And it would be fun to have fun and good for these players to have meaningful football down the stretch. It's invaluable for the young guys to be in those. Again, you're not having that crowd atmosphere, but they know what's at stake. It doesn't change that. They know that these games are critical, and a win against the Eagles will at least ensure that coming out of the bye, at least for a few weeks, right? Maybe 2 to 3 weeks, those games are going to have a hell of a lot of meaning. And if you lose, I guess as a fan, the good byproduct is then you're 2-8 and still have a chance for a really good draft pick. So I guess you could look at it as a win-win. But yeah, let's just hope that a week from now, I'm not, here on the pod discussing another heartbreaking Giant loss. I'm so accustomed to it that I don't see anything else. But we'll see what happens. I'll talk to you guys next week.